Hey guys, it's Josh from KDM Tuners. Today we're here to install a coilover kit on a Hyundai Veloster turbo. This particular kit that we're going to do today is a JDM Sport kit, but what you see in this video will be universal to any coilover kit that you use, whether it be KSPORT, BC, NGM, Geico, whatever it is that you have. I think the new brand everyone's doing is yellow. But this video should help you guys out if you want to do this yourself. So I hope you guys enjoy the video, and let's get it on.
Let's get it on. Let's get it on.
All right, guys. So first things first. This is a used kit that we picked up to install here. So you want to go over a couple things. One, make sure you have all the parts. For two, the main thing and the thing that I see a lot of people make mistakes on with installing coilovers in general is the preload of the spring on the front shocks or front assembly. A lot of guys will try to raise and lower the car by using these collars and adjusting the spring tension. When these come from the factory, they come already preloaded, so they have a preload on them. You do not want to mess with these at all. So if you get into a situation where they're off or something happens, or you buy a used set like this where you're not really sure if someone messed with it or not, what you want to check for is this spring, you want to be able to spring it or spin it freely, but you don't want it to wobble around in the unit. So you don't want it clunking around or wobbling around too much. A little bit of play is okay, but not too much. So just like this, how it spins, this is actually a little bit loose, so we might tighten this up. But it's not bad. So if you get into a shock where this is like you can't turn it at all, it's too tight. If you get it to where it wobbles around there, it's too loose. You just want it set just right. And the reason is there's a bearing at the top of the housing on these. On these ones, these are identical to the BC Sports. So the BC coilovers, they use a metal ball bearing up here, or a bearing. KSPORT uses a Teflon. And what happens is if you preload this spring too much, you actually destroy the bearing up here and you get a clunk and weird stuff. So that's the reason why you don't want to mess with these. On certain applications, when you start getting to corner balancing and race applications, you start messing with this preload of the springs. For any street driven cars though, just do not mess with these from the factory at all. Do not touch these collars at all if you don't have to. The adjustment of the actual height of the front is going to be done here. So you loosen this collar and the whole shock unit turns inside the housing on the shock. So that's first step on these. So going into that, rear shocks a little bit different. The adjustment again is going to be opposite. So you're not adjusting the housing or the strut itself for ride height. This is just dampening. So we'll get into that, how to adjust that later in the video. The actual adjustment on the ride height in the rear is going to be on these collars here. So it's exactly opposite of what you do on the front to adjust the ride height. So, and we'll get into that later. So that's it on that. All right, guys. The first thing we're going to do is going to remove the strut from the car. So this is the stock strut that this guy has arc springs on here, it looks like. First thing you want to do is when you remove the strut from the car, everything's going to want to drop down. So what we do is we put a jack stand underneath, or a jack stand, it doesn't matter, whatever you have, just to support the whole thing so we can get everything loose. And then once we get all the bolts and everything ready for it to come out, we'll actually lower the jack down, so it lowers the whole system down. You just don't want it to slam down. And we just lower it enough to get everything out. So first step is to support the whole deal with a jack or jack stand. Next thing we're going to do right now is remove the lines from the strut. So there's two brackets here. One's a 10 millimeter, one's a 12 millimeter, and we're going to go ahead and remove those. And then we'll save these for now. Save the bolts. Okay. And once those are nice and loose, just kind of move those off to the side. The next thing I like to do is go ahead and remove just the top nut here for the tie rod. We You can use a ratchet, you can use a breaker bar. Sometimes they're on there pretty tight. Just to make things easy for today, I'm just gonna use the right impact to get this off. That one wasn't on very tight at all, so we're gonna hang on to that and slide that out. Sometimes if there's too much tension on this, it's gonna be hard to get out. You can just jack the whole thing up, or you just hit it with a hammer, a little mallet, and bash it out of there. So just move that off to the side. The next thing I like to do is go ahead and remove the 2 bolts that hold the knuckle to the strut tower, or the strut, basically. On these, there's an adjustment for camber on this that go in and out. It doesn't really matter where it is now, I guess, because you're gonna have to get in alignment after you do this anyways to get it perfect. But what I like to do on any car that I touch, just so it's uniform to me, is when you put this knuckle back in the car, you're gonna push it all the way in until it touches. So, and when you guys start messing with that, you'll see how much there's movement there. And then just a little keynote bonus info would be if you use camber bolts or anything like that, you probably see them for sale. Basically what that is, you'll replace this top bolt and it allows you to have more movement in and out. So that's how a camber bolt works. Some of them are adjustable. There's a lot of weird things, but just touching on that. So let's go ahead and remove these 2 bolts here. And what we're gonna use on those is gonna be a 19 millimeter where the nut is, and a 17 millimeter on the bolt head. So you're gonna go ahead and stick your 17 on there, and for us, we're gonna use our impact again to get that. Lower one down. I have our compressor set super low right now, so that's why these are usually around 100 foot-pounds of torque. So they're pretty tight. To get these out, you can just wobble it and they come out if you have the pressure off of it. If there's pressure on this or it's not down far enough, these will be hard. You can always, again, hit it with a mallet or something to push these out, or give it a little wiggle. But as you remember, I was saying the movement for camber, see how much that moves in and out? So just always when you put them back together, you're gonna push it all the way in. So we'll go over that again, so don't worry. So we got those out. So this is gonna wanna fall out just fine. So we're just gonna make sure the lines aren't tangled and just let it sit like that. So, okay, so now this is all loose. The next step for us would be to remove the 3 nuts at the top of the tower. And then when we move this out, depending on how we can get it out, usually I lower it down in between the slot between the axle and the steering rack deal right here. I always forget what this is called, I don't know why. So you can just let this flop over and sit for now, and then we'll show you how to remove that in a second. But let's go remove the 3 upper nuts at the top of the strut tower. That will be next. All right, the 3 top nuts. This guy has, looks, I don't know if this is a bar from eBay. This is the same bar that TurboSox sells. It's an aluminum 1-piece strut bar. On these, whether you have this, a Pierce, or none at all, the rear nut back here is hard to get to usually. You're probably gonna wanna try to find yourself one of these little swivels. This seems to be the best to get clear of this plastic shroud, so you can get it in there. There you go, just like that, because trying to get into it from the top is not always easy. This guy has already cut his piece out here to make that work, but so we don't need the swivel, but you guys buy a swivel. If you don't have one in your arsenal, you're gonna need one of these. They're not expensive, but good to have, so. All right, that one's on there. Now, when you guys are doing this, don't go and remove the nuts completely off. You can remove 2 of them completely, and then leave at least 1 in there so the strut doesn't go flying out the bottom. If you remove all 3 of these, you're gonna drop the strut right out the bottom. It'll just fall out of the car. We wanna do that in a controlled manner. So go ahead and remove 2 of these nuts. And what I like to do, so I don't lose them, is stick them up here. On the kit we have, it came with nuts. So we're not gonna reuse these, but we, like I said in all our videos, keep all your nuts. Okay, so on this nut, what we're gonna do is, front of the car, gonna grab the shock tower and loosen this at the same time so we can control it going down. So underneath we'll grab it. And then we'll slowly let it down. Just let it drop straight down like this, and we're gonna rotate. So now it's down, right? It's just sitting in here. Now to get it out, we're just gonna kind of rotate it out of here. Down, watch the fender so you don't scratch the paint. And we're gonna pop this whole sucker out. There you go. That's uninstalling a strut. Super simple. You guys won't have any issues with this. So moving on, we'll get the other one out and we'll show you how to reinstall the new coilovers. So cool. All right, so now we have the old strut out of the car and we're gonna go ahead and put our new strut in. Putting it in is the exact opposite of taking it out. So what you wanna do is be careful when you put it in not to hit the car. So I always put my hand on top of the plate here so if anything hits, it's my hand. So you're gonna put it right back down in the hole here and rotate it in the car. And then straight up. So I'll try not to get my head in the way here, but you gotta kind of look up into the fender well to line up the holes and push it up in there. And then just like the other one, we're just gonna put one nut on the top of it just to hold it in place until we tighten it up later. All right, so now what we did, we put the one nut here. We're gonna go ahead and tighten all three of these, just hand tight. They don't need to be torqued down yet. We'll do that when the car's on the ground. But make sure, you wanna make sure this is seated nice and snug. So just snug it up here, all three of these, so it seats the strut. So there we go. So now that's on there. We'll go back down underneath and button up the bottom. So we're gonna get everything to its home. So let's lift the whole control arm with the jack. Oh, we're sliding there. You're gonna put it right under the ball joint and just lift the whole unit up. Make sure the brake line is not behind the knuckle and make sure it's over the top. So I'm gonna slide this all together, get it close. And that, I wonder if we lift it beyond its point. Slide this in first, the tie rod. Give it a little bit more. Get that in there. And we can go ahead and button that up. And that is your 17 millimeter nut on there. It's about 55 pounds. And we just use the impact and get it nice and tight. That's it on that one. Okay, and then we can let this back down again. And then we're gonna stick the bolts back through. So on this one, you just kind of play with the jack to get it lined up. Or if you're super strong, you can just do it without the jack. It just takes a little finagling to get these bolts back in. Okay. Go ahead and hand crank those on. These nuts have seen better days, but they're still good. Okay, so on this, we use our impact again. It's a 19 millimeter and a 17 millimeter wrench. And remember, when you go to put these in, you want to press these all the way in until you hear that clunk. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and impact that on. Okay. These are about 100 foot-pounds of torque, so I'll just crank it down. And we get the bottom one. Again, make sure this ring is just hand tight for now because we're going to readjust this whole assembly. But now let's install the lines. So this is your speed sensor. So we'll go ahead and install that back into its normal position there. Doesn't need to be super tight. That's probably about 10 foot-pounds. And this one's 12 millimeter here for the brake line bracket. And if you guys want to torque that one down, I'd say probably anywhere from 12 to 14 pounds is all you need. 10 pounds is probably more than enough as well. Okay, and that's side one. So now we'll jump to the other side and get the other one buttoned up real quick. So I'll show you how to do that. So let's jump to the other side here. All right, guys, just like the last side, we're gonna do this the same way. We're gonna put the strut in, being careful not to hit the fender. Or tip it in and set it right on the control arm. And then from control arm, we go up. So we're gonna go up and find the holes for this. So you probably have to get your head in there and line up the holes. Want to go in the holes. Oh, it's not that. Look what we did. We got to take the nuts off. All right.
What you did.
What we did. It doesn't need to be super tight, just enough to be on there. We'll tighten this when the car's on the ground. Okay, so that's in place. And we go back down to the underbelly of the beast. Next step would be we're going to jump to the back and do the back real quick, and then we're going to lower the whole car down on the floor. And once it's on the floor, we'll take measurements around the car and then check to see the ride height if we like it and adjust from there. And we'll show you guys how to do that too, so it's pretty simple. All right, so let's jump to the rear of the car. All right, so the next step on the rear, the first thing you want to do is put the jack under the torsion beam. You don't need to jack it up a whole lot, but if you lift it up maybe just 1/4 of an inch to take the pressure off the struts, it'll help removing the struts a lot easier for you guys. So go ahead and just get under here and jack this thing up. Put it right on the lip of the beam into there, and just to get the pressure off of it. So we don't want that thing moving without us ready to do so. So just leave your jack in there once you get it jacked up, and we'll now go to remove the struts. So it's super easy, 2 bolts each side, super simple. Okay guys, on the rear we have on each side, the top strut bolt is going to be located behind the wheel. We torque this down to 85 pounds, so it should be in there pretty tight. I usually use a giant breaker bar to get this loose. Sometimes they're pretty stuck in there. Today, because, well, for one, I have an impact. For 2, to save time and energy, we're just going to rip this off with an impact. So on both sides of the car, we're going to go ahead and remove this. What the fuck? My impact dies. Back to the breaker bar like I was saying. Just get the breaker bar on there. Oh, I haven't done this in so long, I'm gonna need an extension. You can kind of just get this loose, and then you can either turn it out this way, or if you want to stick another ratchet on there, you don't even have to use a brake bar. Some of these you can get with a ratchet, but really, from my experience, a lot of these are like super tight. So now that I loosen that, I'm gonna actually get a ratchet on there because this will take forever otherwise. So I'll be right back. All right, so now I got that loose. We get the ratchet on there. This bolt is super long, so it might take some time to turn it out. Okay, now on to the other side. Let's break this sucker loose. Okay, and we get the ratchet on there. To the car, we're going to remove the two lower nuts that hold the struts on there. These should be, I don't remember what the torque rate on it is. I want to say like right around 55 pounds. On the stock ones, you don't have to be careful for over torquing. On the KSPORTs, you do. On the BCs and these JDMs, you don't really have to. You can torque them to whatever, but 55 pounds is good enough. And these are on there really tight. So we're going to use a breaker bar on this as well. So a lot of times what I do is push it through here, the other side. You can take a mallet and pull that bolt out. There we go. Remove that bolt. And this strut should just fall out of here. Oh yeah, this thing is, whoa. Whoa. What the heck? Ah, here we go. Got the stock one out. And then now we'll go to the other side and do the same thing. As you can see, what I'm doing here is the way my breaker bar is set up, or all of them really, is once I crank it all the way, I can't get any more leverage on it. So I have to keep turning this. See, right now I'm hitting bottomed out, so the only way to get more leverage is to spin this socket a quarter of a turn or one turn over, and I can get more leverage on it. See? So right there, and we're gonna turn it, stick it back in. There you go. Alright, so putting the spring in first. This one comes with a rubber base this spring actually was in this way. I kind of feel that they had these springs in upside down. They're supposed to go in like this. So whoever installed these arc ones had them upside down actually. But anyway, besides that, this is the comparison between the two. These came pre-adjusted. We're just going to throw them on the car and see how it comes out because I'm not familiar with this cap. So I don't want to go too low, and then we'll just start and see how it looks and adjust from there. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and put this rubber piece on the base inside the cup. Just set it in there. And what we're going to do is, so we have the top hat has a spacer, a little deal. We're going to go ahead and install that because it came with it. We're going to stick it on here. And what we're going to do is pretty simple. We're just going to slide it over the bushing, and it's going to sit in here like this. But for now, we're going to let it slide back down, and we're just going to let it sit in here like that. So for now, we just set them in place and leave it like that for now, okay? And we're going to jump to the other side, set that one in place, and then from there, I'll tell you what to do. Stick this collar on the spring itself, and get our little plastic doohickey majiggy right here. Stick that on the bottom like we did the other side, and we're just going to go ahead and slide this into place and let her sit just like the other one did. If you want to get crazy and you want to see these numbers here, you can adjust those however you want to look, however you want. Doesn't really matter. So once these are in place, one thing that's going to help, and I'll say right off the bat, by leaving those bump stops in there, is it's a little less dangerous on this step. One thing that happened to me on my car, I started to lift this beam back into place on mine, and see how they kind of sit offset a little bit. Well, one side went straight into the bucket like it's supposed to, and one side was still kicked over a little bit, and it just looked like it needed a little push. So I went ahead and went to go tap the spring into place, and it went boom, and it hurt my hand a little bit, but I was thinking, oh wow, that was a lot of tension on that thing. And what happened was it ripped my finger off completely. So word of advice is be careful on this next step, okay? And with the bump stops in there, you can't really get yourself into trouble like that. So, but just word of warning. So, but anyways, with that said, the next step is to go ahead and use the jack to lift up the beam into place, and that's what we're going to do now. As you're doing this, just be very cautious, watch both sides, make sure they slide up freely, they don't bind or jam on anything. So we're just going to lift this up enough to, when we put the new strut in, we just want to make it easy for us to line up the holes. So when we put these in, we're going to go ahead and put the tops in first, and then once the tops are in place, then we'll go ahead and jack the torsion beam up to get the lower bolt in. One thing I noticed with these is there's a lot of play in between up top. So these bushings, kind of a bummer, and it doesn't go the other way is even worse. So, well, when we stick these in, it's supposed to fit in there nice and snug. It doesn't, and that might be a brand thing, but that could cause a rattle, but we'll see how that goes. So anyways, I'm rambling. Let's get these in. We're gonna put the top nuts in, or top bolts in first, and torque those down to spec, and then we'll get the bottom ones tied up, and that's it. So let's go ahead and move to the top and put those top bolts in. All right, so what we're gonna do on the first things first, what I like to do is lubricate everything. So we can use any kind of basic grease. I tend to use like a brake grease on these, brake caliper grease. It just helps. It's really good with water. It seems to do a good job. But just the middle shaft of the bolt, and then what we're gonna do is slide the bolt in, not all the way, but just partly, just so it's in the hole. And then what I like to do is crawl under so I can see what I'm doing. And we're gonna place the strut, or the shock, I should say, strut or shock, whatever you want to call it, in its place here. We're just slide the bolt through. There we go. And then we'll go ahead and tighten that down. And we could torque that down all the way to 85 pounds. One thing I will say is on this top bolt, if you do not torque this down enough, you will get a rattle. Just like I was saying before, most of the shocks are nice and snug in there. This one's a little loose, so we might get that same rattle anyways. But on most setups, when this bolt is not torqued, you'll get a rattle. So if you have a rattle in the rear or a clunk when you go over speed bumps and stuff, this is one of the problems that you run into. So let me get the torque wrench set up real quick and get this to 85 foot-pounds. We're going to use a long extension on this. So with the long extensions, it takes up some of the foot-pounds of torque on there. So it'll probably be more like 75 to 80 foot-pounds once we get the extension on there. So, but set the torque wrench to 85. There we go, 85 pounds. We'll jump to the other side, do the exact same thing. Now that we got our shocks just temporarily fitted, you can go ahead and move them over a little bit. Let's see, looks like we got to go up a half inch or so, so let's go ahead and jack this sucker up. Okay, so what we got here is kind of the same thing we went through on the front. So the torsion beam is up as high as it's going to go, but we don't really have enough leverage here to get the let me look on this other side real quick. Yeah, we don't have enough space there, so what we got to do is we're going to loosen the collars on here, spin the base caps down a little bit so we can get that lined up. Sometimes in auto mechanics, things don't go as planned. Most of the time they don't. You gotta get a little ingenuity in you and see if you can work out something. So I think that's what we're gonna try here. I don't know if we can get that in the... There we go. That should hold it in place in theory. There we go. I just want to loosen this collar up enough to get it out of the way. And then what we're going to do is we want to extend this out. So we're going to screw it down until we can get that hole lined up. And then once it's on the car, you can actually readjust this if you want it to go lower or whatnot. Simply by turning this shock housing like we did on the front. Okay. Alright, 65 pounds. And this top collar here, this is very important in this install. If you do not tighten this collar and drive it around with this collar loose, the shock strut or the cartridge wheel will back itself completely out of this housing and you will destroy this whole unit. So, so basically we loosened this a few turns. If you wanted to tighten it back up, you just turn this whole housing again, okay, and tighten it back up. So, but for now we're just going to hand snug everything until we get on the ground and test everything out, and then we'll go from there. A good way to measure this to make sure both sides are exactly the same is you can actually take the measurement, unlike the front, and measure from the collar to the top of the cartridge here and make sure that the measurements are exactly the same from side to side. So it's not as critical of a measurement as the front, but that's that. So we'll leave that the way it is for now, and we'll come back to that. We'll get into the adjustment of the dampening as well in the end of the video. We'll put the wheels back on. We're going to lower the car, put it back on the ground, check all the measurements around the car, and I'll show you that, and see if we like the ride height, and if we have to adjust anything, we'll show you how to do that. Pretty simple. So let's go do that. We put the car down. We already noticed that this is way off, so we're going to go ahead and adjust the rear height, ride height. So get you guys, show you guys how to do this. So all these kits come with a spanner wrench to do this. This kit did not come with them because it was used, so we had to find one that works, and it just so happens that this is a really odd size. So we're gonna go ahead and get the spanner wrench on there and hit this with a mallet. If you guys don't have a spanner wrench and run into an issue, you can always use a flathead screwdriver. The bummer part of this is the whole thing's spinning. I think we got some dirt and debris in there, so what we're gonna have to do, unfortunately, is take them out. All right, guys. So we finished everything. We lowered the car down to give it a test, and what we saw was the fronts were 25. So what we do is we measure from the ground to the fender, and we'll show you that right now. Okay, so to measure the height, this is what I do, and the reason why I do it from down here is it's more of a static measuring point from side to side. So there's no variation from side to side, depending on how the preload of the spring is or anything is set. This number is going to will translate from side to side no matter what. So basically, up inside here, there's the strut cartridge, and we're going to find out how far up the strut cartridge is in comparison to the bottom of the strut housing. So we're going to slide our tape measure up there and take a measurement. So that's 1 inch, 1.5, 1 5/8. So our strut is up, this cartridge is up there at 1 5/8 of an inch. So when we go to put the other side on, we're going to go ahead and preset the whole setup with a 1 5/8 inch measurement here inside. Okay. Anyways, so we measured from the fender wheel to the floor. Driver side is 25 inches. Passenger side was 25 and an eighth or something like that. And then we noticed that the passenger rear was 25 5/8, and the driver rear was 25.5 right off the bat. So what that tells us is that we need to first of all lower the passenger corner 1/8 of an inch, and that will actually balance out the whole car. So then we'd be 25 and 25 in the rear, and then, or 25 and a half, 25 and a half in the rear, and 25 and 25 in the front. But the owner is not satisfied with the ride height on that. He wants it lower. So we're gonna go 1/4 inch lower on the front. On the strut tower shock itself, we went and loosened the collar already all the way up just to get it out of the way. And what happens is, on that adjustment that we showed earlier in the video from underneath, this whole unit has to go up. So we're gonna actually move this whole unit up 1/4 inch. So when we measure underneath the housing, we wanna make sure that the number shrinks by 1/4 inch. So that's what we did here. We already adjusted this one on this side, so we're gonna hop to the other side and I'll show you how we adjust that and what measurement we're actually looking at to make these match. And then we'll jump back to the rear. We're just gonna max out the collars on the rear. On most of these cars, if you max out the collar on the rear, you're gonna get some rattle when you go over bumps. The owner on this one prefers the look of it, and it's not gonna hurt performance, it's just noisy. So we're gonna go ahead and do that, and I'll show you how to adjust that too. It's pretty easy. So that's it. So we'll hop over to the other side and show the process on that. So let's go to the other side. So now we're on the other side here. We're gonna start off by loosening the collar in on the shock again, and the measurement we have, we're gonna do 1/4 inch on the bottom. We need it to shrink by 1/4 inch. Right now we are at 7 3/4 almost. So let's go to, we're gonna match the other side. So it was 1 3/8. So we're gonna do 1 3/8 on this. So in order to do that, we're gonna turn the whole housing. You'll see, notice the threads, the way they're going. It's shorter on this side, longer on this side. So we want to turn it to the left. So just keep turning it. Now this is gonna have to go a lot of turns. Another way you can do it too is always, if you have this collar down, you can go up 1/4 inch and measure it and leave that collar there, and then just tighten it till the collar goes all the way down. But on this, it kind of gets in the way. So now I'm tightening this by hand, which is not the easiest way to do it. There's different tools you can use to do that. This is something you can do with the wheel on the car if you have to. Okay, we went down a good amount, so we're gonna check the measurement underneath again. We're at 1.5 inches. So we just need to go another 1/8 inch to match the other side. Okay. Another two or three turns here. Okay, that's it there. So now that we got that in place, again, we didn't mess with this at all, the preload. This one's a little bit on the looser side, but still okay. But anyways, we go down here, tighten this collar. Now it's important at this point in the game, you wanna make sure that this collar is super tight. So get your spanner wrench on there. Okay, and then we're gonna get it tight. Sometimes you might need 2 spanner wrenches if the top wants to spin, but if you just give it a tap. Oh, we boogered that one up. On this brand, these collars are really soft aluminum apparently, but on KSPORT and BC, I don't see those getting boogered up that easy. So if you don't have a spanner wrench, you can actually use a flathead screwdriver and stick it right here and use a hammer and tap it. That won't hurt these as well. So, but anyways, that's it on the coilover for this. Once it's super tight on there, it's pretty much all you got to do. Other than that, we're just going to put the wheels back on the front, lower the car again, and see how we like it. Should be a 1/4 inch drop. But for now, let's go to the rear and button up the rear real quick. So hopefully after that we won't have anything else to do. So let's go. On the collars, we have them in here already. We need to go up. What we could probably do, we didn't tighten them all the way. So just get these to spin all the way up. You can use a screwdriver, spanner wrench. Screwdriver seems to work the easiest here. What we're gonna do is spin the collars up. Let's see how we're gonna do this. There we go. So we got the top to spin up. And we're just gonna put the screwdriver in here and just spin it all the way up. We're just gonna max out the collars here. The next step lower to this would be if we took the collars out altogether. I don't like doing that if I don't have to. So now that we got that one, we're gonna go ahead and use the screwdriver to turn the next collar. And then we're gonna tighten it, meet it up with another collar at the top so they wedge together. And when they're maxed out, you don't need to get a spanner wrench and tighten them super tight because there's nowhere they can go. So they'll just always stay up at the top. Okay, that's maxed out there. Now, with these particular brand, the JDM brand, the way the housings are, these struts are super long. So right now they're already maxed out in the housing. We can't go any lower on these. I think it just keeps, the shocks are, it's just loose in here. Like there's nothing we can do with the shock to absorb or pull this whole beam up to keep these tight in here when it's just sitting here. I imagine you can get shims under here maybe made to tighten up the gap a little bit. The downside with these that I see versus the other kits is when you hit big bumps and you get the back end of the car airborne a little bit, you're gonna get that sound every time. So you're gonna get a little rattle as you go over bumps. As long as you got spring tension on the back, you'll never hear anything, but anytime you hit like a big pothole or bump, you're gonna get that sound. So without getting shims and all that in there, there's just no way around it. Anyways, let's say you wanted to raise the car. You're gonna go the opposite way, is you're just gonna turn these rings and tighten them down as much as you can until you get to a spot that you want your ride height to be. So sometimes the easiest way to do that is to take the shocks off, or just the lower bolt and lower the whole beam down so you can get to the collars and then adjust them and then push the whole thing back up again. But that's pretty much on the ride height adjustment. It's all here on the spring housing and the perch here. This really doesn't have anything to do with the height adjustment so much. So, okay guys, on this real quick, the dampener adjustment for the rear is up here. It's a knob. In order to adjust these, typically for the street, you'd want, first of all, let's go all the way soft. So turn the knob, there's an arrow that says soft. Turn the knob all the way soft. All right, now that's all the way soft. Every time you turn the knob, it's gonna feel like a click. So we're gonna go 10 on these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're 10 clicks to the hard side of the dampening. For street applications, 5 to 10 is pretty good. For track, we turn them, almost all the way up. I'm pretty sure on these ones we're 36 clicks of adjustment on them. So if you go too stiff, it's gonna be a harsh ride. Guys that are like super low might want to be a little bit harder so they don't bottom out and rub. But 10 is about where you want to be on those. All right, guys. So we got everything adjusted. We're gonna go around the car real quick and check the measurements. What I like to do is make sure that I know that my garage is on a flat level surface. I've put levels all over this thing, and luckily, usually the garage is sloped down towards the entrance. Mine's flat for whatever the hell reason, but it's good for me. So what we're gonna do is measure from the ground up to the lip of the fender. So to see what the measurements are, and we'll see where we're at. So basically you take the tape measure down to the floor to the lip of the fender in the center. We're at 25 1/4 on this. So let's hop over to this side here. It's exactly 25 1/4. So the rears are exactly the same, regardless of what the ride height is, which is pretty good so far. We're maxed out on the rear on this kit. So the JDM Sports, that's as far as we can go. Over time driving it, it might settle a little bit, so you might get down to like another 1/4 inch drop on that. On the KSPORTs, I think the BC regulars is the same as this. For the KSPORTs, we can get down to like 20, I want to say 24. So you can almost get an extra inch drop out of the KSPORT kit. And then you have the BC Sport lows, the extreme lows, and you can, I think, go another inch on top of that. So well, let's get to the front and see what we did over there. So we dropped a 1/4 inch on the measurement on the tower. And let's see what we landed on this. So we actually are exactly at 25 on the front. I think before we were 25 1/8, I don't remember what it was, but we're 25 here. Yeah, and on this side, exactly 25. So we have 25 on the fronts and then 25 1/4 on the rears. So we have a 1/4 inch rake towards the front, which is good for driving purposes. We can go way lower in the front if we wanted to, but this is a pretty nice setup to go with. So with all that said, adjustment wise, typically when you have a car like this, the driver's side is going to be a 1/4 inch lower in the front, and the passenger rear is going to be a 1/4 inch higher. It's typically how it goes. Somehow we got lucky enough to level this thing out completely, which is great. So that's it on the measurement side of it. And let's go drive it around the block real quick, and we'll come back and measure one more time to see if anything changed. Make sure to see if we hear any weird noises or rattles and address that. Before we go, we got to make sure we torque down our strut towers to fit. We'll probably go 50 pounds on those and give it a drive. So that's what we're going to do now. We'll torque those down and then we'll hit the road. All right, guys, that's it for the install for the coilover kit for the Veloster Turbo. Overall, everything went pretty smooth. We went for a test drive, and after the test drive, we brought it in. We didn't hear any weird noises or anything funky going on. The car pulled to the left a little bit, which is normal. It's going to need an alignment. Anytime you guys mess with suspension parts on these cars, definitely get an alignment. Don't skimp on that. The final measurements that we ended up getting was 25 1/4 in the rear and 24 3/4 in the front on both, all around. So both fronts 24 3/4, both rears 25 1/4. It's got a perfect rake to it. When you start weight balancing everything and corner balancing, it's pretty close to what you're going to get as far as a rake goes. So overall, pretty satisfied with that. Not sure it got as low as the customer would want. On the rear of this JDM Sport kit, it's as low as it's going to go. You can take the collars out completely and probably get another maybe 1/2 inch out of it. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but if you want to go lower, I'd recommend something like a BC Extreme Low or even a KSPORT will get lower than these. But for the price of these, he got them on a super deal, so I mean it's worth it. So. Other than that, there's nothing really added. If you guys are curious about the JDM Sport setups, it's identical to the BC. I mean, I'm pretty sure it came out of the same factory. I mean, the knobs, everything is exactly the same. So the quality is the same. So it's something to look at if you guys are interested. Other than that, if you guys like what we're doing over here or enjoyed the video, please subscribe, like our videos. It just keeps us motivated to keep doing these things for you guys. And if there's anything you like to see, as we always say, just contact us on our social media sites and request a video. We've gotten a lot of requests, so we'll have a lot of videos coming at you guys. And we have a lot of stuff already edited and lined up so far. So with that said, hope you guys enjoyed it, and enjoy your weekends, and see you next week. So thank you.